So I'll try to deep dive a little bit into what Klaus just mentioned and talk a little bit more about ZSM, why we decided from industry perspective to set it up. We heard just about Deutsche Telekom motivation. Of course, we are very much aligned. And what we are doing there and what are our next steps. So the whole idea about zero-touch network and service management is to enable agile service delivery and new business opportunities. So what are the trends and the market drivers behind it? First of all, it's important to realize that the whole world is automating. All major industries are actually rapidly digitalizing and automating their businesses, relying on state-of-the-art cloud technologies, as Klaus mentioned, cloud native, and networking connectivity. And cloud service providers have demonstrated that digital services, we have a high level of automation, are both technically feasible and are extremely attractive to their own customers. And web-scales actually managed to set up a new experience to their customers, a digital experience, and they deliver rapid, personalized, on-demand services, leveraging, as we said, cloud technologies and networking connectivity. And service providers start evolving in that direction. We've seen the evolution towards SDN and NFV, automating the delivery path, but the transformation into virtualized, programmable network, service-based architecture, as Klaus mentioned, brings a lot of complexity. And without automation, it's very, very tricky to move in that direction. So automation is becoming an essential part of the journey. And in addition, the new business models and value creation opportunities which are enabled by different technology, like, for example, network slicing, imposing unprecedented operational agility and higher cooperation across network domains, and we need to change the way that we manage and operate our network. In fact, network slicing is one of the fundamental foundations for value creation, and this is something that must come together with automation. Just to give you an idea, and of course you're welcome to approach us later on, Bell Labs Consulting has made the economical model about the evolution path, and they realized that if you add, for example, NFV and SDN to your network, you increase the complexity and you increase the TCO around 20%. If you add network slicing on top of that, you increase it by 30%, the TCO. If you go for full automation immediately, you improve the scale, you improve the operation, and you reduce the TCO by around 30%. So if someone is, of course, interested in this study, so I'm happy to share it offline. So automation becomes definitely something which is necessary to include when we do this transformation. So one of the triggers for this automation, as I mentioned, is that the destructive deployment of 5G. And if you want to have network slicing and all these fancy 5G services with open platforms which open your network to innovation by third party, you must move to full end-to-end automation of both network and service management, and this is an urgent need. So what is the current state in the industry? So it's getting better, to be honest. We see some consolidation, for example, eComp and OpenO. We see ZSM is coming in, trying to bring them all together. But if you look at the status, there are still multiple inconsistent management framework in the industry, many silos, and lack of alignment, which result in lack of interoperability. Lack of interoperability, of course, prohibit adoption, slow down the process of the journey and the transformation. So it's essential to move into an environment that leverage synergies and achieve alignment through convergence on a single end-to-end framework for the network and service management. And this is one of the roles that in ETSI and ZSM we are taking. Okay, so As Klaus mentioned, end of last year, we started working to set up something in the industry to bring them all together, and we decided to go for ETSI ISG. Of course, there were different reasons for that, because of the work that is done there on virtualization, because ETSI actually is the good place to combine, to bring together the telecom and the IT worlds. And this was demonstrated and proved by NFV, and this is actually building on top of that. There were been 14 members that founded this initiative with 5 operators, all the major vendors and technology providers. And I must say that there were additional supporters when we set up the group, but one of the rules when you set up an ISG that only ETSI member can be part of the founding members. But there was a lot of support behind it, and one good thing about ETSI is also that it's not limited, about ETSI ISG, that it's not limited only to ETSI members. So every participant in the industry that signed the agreement can join and contribute to this work in the industry. And the key objective was to enable the future operational processes and tasks to be executed automatically, hopefully or ideally 100% automatically end-to-end. And we wanted to accelerate the definition of the architecture and to ensure that it can span both physical and virtualized resources, because these new services that service providers will deliver, these new agile services that will be provided on demand, these new services that will be tailored to particular use case using the network slicing, they span both physical and virtualized resources, and you need to have a unified way to operate it or manage. And the idea is also to help the industry to converge around a single architecture. So we want to facilitate the collaboration between open source and between standard organizations, and to ensure that we can create a foundation, a common foundation that can enable a diverse ecosystem of open source groups to produce interoperable solutions with this framework that we create. So we see a great role for ZSM in bringing this all together, and we will see that in a few minutes. So I think the list is already there. Klaus mentioned that. We have around 60 members with 17 operators, and I think the good message will be to the industry if we see more operators joining, even operators that work in open source, because open source has a very important role in the industry. It's actually used to implement and to validate, and it is used to provide feedback into the specification work. And this needs to work together in close iteration. Specification guarantee that we understand the requirements, the global requirements, that we can define an architecture that can evolve to every future use case. And implementation is there to make the validation and provide short feedback in close iteration to improve our specification work. So the work items that Klaus already mentioned them, we started with, of course, understanding scenarios, use cases, and understanding the requirements that they bring. We already have a very nice set of requirements, and Diego will present them later, the key ones. We also started working on the reference architecture. We have a blog, and I'll show it later, a blog that we used to update the industry about the progress that we do all the time with the architecture work. And then when the architecture is mature, we'll start working on the end-to-end network slicing, because end-to-end network slicing is one of the triggers for the need for automation, and we're not going to reinvent the wheel. So for the domains, specific domains, there are probably solutions in SA5, in ITF, in other organizations, so we are going to leverage these solutions, maybe even in open source, in ONAP. We could leverage some of the DCIE protocols or whatever. So we're going to integrate solutions that are available in the industry, considering the end-to-end service automation. So what we need to ensure is that we can enable the end-to-end and then do the automation to ensure that it's not automation only in terms of delivery, that we can also automate the SLA assurance. So understand what is happening, take some cognitive and intelligent actions, and adapt and optimize as necessary. And then we are working also on another document, which is very, very important. This is means of automation. And this document actually explores different means that you can use to automate your network and service delivery, how to automate the decision making, how to automate the assurance, how to automate the interaction between devices, how to automate the lifecycle management. So many things that we want to automate, and we are exploring the mechanisms. Some of them are already in place, some of them are being researched, and these means actually help us to ensure that the architecture that we build can leverage them and ensure that we can have automation in our network. And of course, we have another document, which is a POC. Klaus mentioned that, and I'll go to that very, very quickly. Soon, as Klaus mentioned, and this is important, all the drafts are available in the public area of ZSM. They are drafts, so this is work in progress. But the intention is that to let know the industry what we are working on, what our thought about, and to ask the industry to feedback information and give us feedback on the work and contribute to ensure that we can create class of services, a class of specifications. So this is more or less the high-level framework architecture of ZSM. Uwe will show us later. Show us later the details and do some deep dive into the architecture. But what I can say about the architecture, that first of all, it is modular architecture. We're working on service-based architecture, which is flexible and extensible. So at any point of time, you can add more services to the integration fabric. You have a separation of concerns. So we are working on the resource level, on the network level, and we are working on the end-to-end cross-domain. So we can have multiple domains, and then we have the end-to-end service. The domain services are actually integrated via integration fabric, and we can expose these services internally and some of them externally to authorized entities. And we have the integration fabric that can help the digital storefront, or what people know as a BSS in the past, access directly the management domain or the end-to-end service management. And we support, the idea about this separation is to ensure that the complexity of each domain is kept internally, and you don't need to expose the complexity. The only thing that you need to expose are services that are needed for the end-to-end. We also support model-driven services and resource abstraction to abstract this complexity to the outside environment, if it's outside the domain, if it's outside the service, and if it's outside to the digital storefront. We have mechanism to enable adaptive closed-loop automation, where we actually connect together the decision-making and the mechanisms and bounded by rules and policies. So of course we need to have, it must be mentioned that this is very, very abstractive. Of course there are many, many loops that can be created, and the policy and the rules actually ensure that this is all functioning appropriately. Another thing is that all these elements that provide services are stateless, and all of this is designed for failure. And we have also data services that are available in different places that allows us to have fast access to the data and to ensure consistency also, and also fast operation. But Uwe will deep dive into the architecture, and you'll see more. You have here the link to the draft itself. So what about proof of concept? Proof of concept is a very, very important tool for us to, first of all, demonstrate the viability of the technology, but also to implement things and feed us input into the specification work, helping us to improve the work that we are doing. So we encourage actually the industry to create POCs and to demonstrate that. The POCs themselves are multi-party projects, so everyone can participate in that. It can be network or service provider, different suppliers, vendors, technology providers, etc. University, research centers, open source projects. Can you imagine ONAP will contribute to our POC? What a day. and then integrators, etc. So everyone is invited. You don't need to be an ETSI member to participate in the POC. The only condition that we have is that the main contact for the POC needs to be an ETSI member. So actually, we open up the opportunity for the industry to learn about this and to demonstrate it and to give us feedback how we can do things better. The POC usually addresses at least one of our topics. So at the moment, we have a first topic approved, and the topic is to demonstrate a ZSM scenario. We have a POC, a first POC, which was accepted, and we will get later on a presentation, a short presentation about this, but during the week I know that there are many presentations about this POC in the Intel booth, if I'm not wrong, and also in the conference, the main conference, and I would like to invite you all to go there and to see the POC and get an idea about this, and later on join us and help us to develop the POCs. And as I mentioned before, the results will be feedback. So everyone that develop POC need also to provide a report. What about the learnings? What about the challenges, etc. And based on that, we will continue our specification work. So the link to the first POC, you can find it here. Okay, what are our working principles? So as I mentioned before, we are not going to reinvent the wheel when the solution is already there. So we are going to use existing specification and solutions, both in ETSI and outside of ETSI, and we will use them when it's appropriate, of course, because we don't want to create duplication and we want to maximize the synergy. And if, for example, we will identify that there is a need to add something, to improve something, we will work with this organization that is the owner of this solution, to ensure that it can work on that and provide that. Of course, if there will be some gaps that we identify, so if this is in the scope of ETSI ZSM, like for example the end-to-end service, so we will do that in ETSI. Most probably if it's in somewhere else, for example SA5 or in ITF or other organization, we will ask them to develop that. Okay, and the input from the POC are also used for our work, and all the deliverables are openly published. So what next? The next is that we will conduct a gap analysis to ensure that, that we don't duplicate the activities and that the barriers for end-to-end automation are addressed. And again, if there are some gaps, we will work to fill the gap. About harmonization and collaboration across the industry, Klaus already mentioned that. So we see the role of ZSM not only in defining the framework, but also in facilitating the collaboration among the different organizations. We know that there are industry standards that are working on more domain-specific, and we have open source and commercial implementations that work on implementation and validation. And what we need to ensure is that we see the industry requirements, we define the framework, and we work together with this organization and also help them to work together to ensure that we can all work based on the common framework. And maybe it's a good point also to mention that we started the discussion with the Linux Foundation, specifically with ONAP. They identified the need for specification and the important role of both activities, open source and standardization, and the need to work together. And we are working to ensure that this is happening. Additional information is available in the following links. You can see the term of reference. You can see the technology page to learn more about this. All the ZSM blocks are available here. As I mentioned, we use them to update the industry about the progress of the work and about the other interesting activities that relate to that. We have the ZSM wiki when we have information related to the POC. We have the ZSM FNQ. We have a list of members, and we have the operators white paper, which is always nice. Not necessarily all of them are ETSI ZSM members, but it's important to see that because it gives different perspective of operators that we consider in our work. So maybe a little bit epilogue from my side. So we have just embarked the exciting journey towards automation transformation that we believe that will help operators to meet the user expectations, the new one that was set by the web scales, for service agility and create new business opportunities. We intend to drive highly focused and agile industry effort involving key players spanning the breadth of the ecosystem. And I want to mention here that the ISG, again, is open for both ETSI members and non-ETSI members, and I would like to invite the different players in the industry to join us and help us to ensure that we define a good framework, a good solutions that can help to converge the industry and provide value to the operators and to the web scales and to the entire industry. And also, please help us to demonstrate POCs and learn from them, because this is a very important tool to manage our activity. Yeah, so by this I actually finished my part. So thank you for that, and I would like to continue just on time. So this was an introduction to the ZSM work, but now we want to do a little bit a deep dive into the scenarios, into the requirements, into the architecture, and then to have some, to hear some, we will learn about the POC, and then to hear some industry perspective from one of the great analysts in the industry. And then we will have an interesting, hopefully interesting debate to understand the different aspects. So I would like to invite at this point Diego Lopez. He's the Head of Technology Exploration and Standards in Telefonica. Diego is the chair of ETSI NFV, one of the founders of ETSI ZSM. And he joined Telefonica at 2011 as a senior technology expert on network middleware and services. He's in charge of technology exploration activities within the GCTO unit of Telefonica. And let me welcome Diego. Of course, you can read more about Diego in the website. Let me welcome Diego to the meeting.